Elections can make or break a country's economy. But did you know that in the year after an election, stock markets can drop by as much as 5%? Or that political promises made during campaigns often lead to national debt rising by billions? The truth is, while elections might seem exciting and full of hope, they often come with hidden costs that affect us all. In this video, we'll uncover how political decisions mess with markets, raise inflation, and cause long-term damage. From the election hangover that hits immediately after the vote to the devastating effects of campaign promises, we'll explore the unexpected side of elections. You'll learn why the economy is often the first casualty of political drama and how the promises that sound so good today can lead to years of pain. Stick around to find out how your vote can affect more than just your future. It could cost you money for years to come. Chapter 1: The Election Economic Hangover. Why post-vote markets tank elections often leave behind a financial hangover that markets can't ignore. Right after elections, uncertainty tends to dominate, and investors hate uncertainty. Studies show that stock markets are usually volatile in the months following elections. A report by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that U.S. elections are a major cause of post-election market dips. Investors worry about the potential for new policies that could shake things up. And it's not just about who wins. The transition period, when the old administration is handing over to the new one, leaves everyone guessing about future plans. Take the 2008 U.S. presidential election. Markets were volatile for months. Why? No one knew what the new president's economic policies would look like, and the financial crisis added fuel to the fire. The uncertainty around changes in tax rates, regulation, and trade deals caused companies to hold off on investments. It's the same story around the globe. In 2017, the UK faced a similar situation with Brexit, where the vote itself caused immediate market crashes. What about the aftermath? Well, studies from The Economist show that in the year following an election, stock prices often drop by an average of 5%. So, the election hangover is real. When there's a shift in leadership, or even just a closely contested race, businesses can freeze up, delaying big decisions like hiring or launching new products. And when businesses hesitate, the economy feels it in the form of slower growth. But it's not just the uncertainty from policy changes. Political drama also plays a role. In countries with unstable political systems, elections can lead to a domino effect. One election loss could trigger a series of instability that extends well beyond the vote itself. As Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate in economics, points out, markets dislike political instability more than bad economic policy. Chapter 2: Promise and Peril. The cost of election campaign promises during election seasons. Promises are everywhere. Politicians say what voters want to hear, even if it's too good to be true. These promises often come at a high cost. In the 2020 US election, both major candidates proposed massive economic packages. On paper, it sounded amazing for voters: new jobs, tax cuts, and stimulus checks. But the reality? These promises often lead to soaring national debt. Here's the hard truth: when governments increase spending to fulfill campaign promises, they usually borrow more money. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, national debt around the world has risen by 40% in the past 2 decades, with election years often seeing the biggest spikes. Let's take a closer look at one promise from the 2016 US elections. Both Trump and Clinton proposed massive infrastructure spending to create jobs. In theory, this would boost the economy. But it also meant borrowing huge sums of money. The resulting debt often leads to inflation, as governments print more money to cover their promises. And it doesn't stop with the US. In India's 2019 elections, the ruling party promised farmers a minimum income. While well-intentioned, this policy led to an increased budget deficit, placing additional pressure on the economy. When governments spend recklessly, it causes instability. And that's something no economy can afford. According to economist Paul Krugman, short-term fiscal relief often comes with long-term economic pain. Additionally, many campaign promises focus on quick fixes. Politicians propose cutting taxes or increasing social benefits to win votes. These temporary measures, however, rarely address underlying structural problems in the economy. By the time the bills come due, the damage is done. Chapter 3: Vote for Stability. How political gridlock destroys growth. Political gridlock can paralyze an economy. When parties are deeply divided, it becomes nearly impossible to pass meaningful legislation. And without strong legislation, growth slows. Take the 2013 US government shutdown. It lasted for 16 days, and economists estimate it cost the economy around $24 billion. The real damage happens in the form of delayed investments. Businesses can't plan for the future when there's no clear direction. The McKinsey Global Institute found that political instability and gridlock can reduce business investment by 2–3% annually. That doesn't sound like much, but over time, that slowdown can lead to massive losses in jobs and productivity. Gridlock doesn't only affect big government decisions. It also stalls local initiatives, infrastructure projects, and trade deals. When Congress or Parliament can't agree, it creates a backlog of unfinished work. These delays can disrupt entire industries, from construction to tech. Take Brazil as an example. The political gridlock in the early 2010s led to a period of stagnation. With political parties refusing to work together, the country faced slower than expected economic growth. In 2015, Brazil's GDP shrank by 3.8%, largely due to political uncertainty. And it's not just about slowing down policy. It also weakens public confidence. A study from the World Bank found that when governments are stuck in gridlock, public confidence drops. This discourages consumers from spending and businesses from investing. After all, when no one knows what will happen next, it's tough to feel optimistic. The longer this gridlock lasts, the worse it gets. Businesses avoid long-term projects when the rules of the game keep changing. In extreme cases, like Greece during the Eurozone crisis, political paralysis can lead to a full-blown recession. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights on how elections influence the economy and what it means for you. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on new content. Chapter 4: Vote for Stability? How political gridlock destroys growth. When elections bring political gridlock, economic growth suffers. In simple terms, when governments can't agree, nothing gets done. A perfect example of this came in 2013, during the US government shutdown. For 16 days, no budget was passed, causing a $24 billion hit to the economy. That's a huge setback for a country trying to maintain stable growth. Political gridlock isn't just an issue in the US. In countries like Italy and Brazil, political infighting has led to weak economic performance. In Brazil, gridlock in the early 2010s resulted in a recession by 2015. A report from the World Bank points out that political uncertainty can reduce business investment by up to 3% annually. And that's not all. Businesses and consumers both take a hit when the government is divided. In a 2017 study, Economists found that when there is political deadlock, consumer confidence falls by 5% on average. Investment drops during these periods, which is a huge problem. Without new investments, industries fail to innovate, and job growth stagnates. When politicians can't pass infrastructure bills or business-friendly laws, it creates a gap that negatively affects economic expansion. For instance, during the 2018 political stalemate in Spain, the construction sector saw a major slowdown due to stalled infrastructure projects. And it doesn't only impact industries like construction. Political gridlock stops progress on key reforms too. Countries that delay tax and pension reforms because of partisan disputes often face higher national debts and inflation. In 2011, Greece's inability to pass key fiscal policies pushed the nation into a severe debt crisis, spiraling down into recession. Investors hate uncertainty. A report by Goldman Sachs highlights that political gridlock is one of the key reasons markets falter. Investors know that without clear policies, their money is at risk. In times of political paralysis, capital becomes more expensive and less available. That's why countries with consistent political leadership often see better economic growth, while those stuck in gridlock experience stagnation. Even short-term gridlock can have lasting effects. When lawmakers can't agree on things like trade deals or new regulations, it delays vital decisions. In Japan, a decade of political gridlock from 2006 to 2016 led to a lost decade of economic growth. These slowdowns are more than just temporary, they shape the long-term trajectory of a nation's economy. Chapter 5: Inflation, Deflation and the Ballot. A hidden link. Elections have a strange way of influencing inflation and deflation. You might not think of political events as a key factor in rising or falling prices, but they have a huge impact. After an election, politicians often scramble to push through policies, many of which involve spending money. This can lead to inflation, where the cost of goods rises rapidly. A 2018 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that inflation spikes by 2–3% within a year of an election in some countries. For example, after the 2008 US election, President Obama pushed through a $787 billion stimulus package. While this was aimed at stabilizing the economy, it also contributed to higher inflation. The Federal Reserve, under Obama's leadership, lowered interest rates to stimulate growth, but this caused more money to flow into the economy. More money meant higher prices for goods, leading to inflation. But inflation isn't the only danger. Elections can also lead to deflation, a decrease in prices that sounds good on the surface but often signals deeper problems. In 2010, after a period of high spending during the recession, Japan saw deflationary pressure as voters and politicians worried about future taxes. The country's government tried to stimulate the economy by lowering interest rates, but deflation caused business investment to plummet, leading to stagnant growth. Sometimes, elections lead to radical policy shifts that cause massive economic instability. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has pointed out that countries that frequently change their leadership or economic policies face higher inflation rates. When new leaders come in with populist promises, such as raising wages or cutting taxes, it can lead to sudden changes in the money supply. This rapid inflation makes everyday goods more expensive for people, reducing their purchasing power. Take Venezuela, for example. In 1998, Hugo Chavez was elected on a promise to redistribute wealth to the poor. His policies led to hyperinflation, and by 2018, Venezuela had one of the highest inflation rates in the world, topping 1,000,000%. While inflation wasn't immediate, it gradually worsened due to radical fiscal policies and printing of money during election years. In the US, inflation was one of the major concerns during the 1970s. The election of Richard Nixon in 1968 saw promises of controlling inflation, but those promises led to even more spending. As a result, inflation hit double digits in the mid-1970s. This connection between politics and inflation is well documented. Milton Friedman, a famous economist, once said, "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon," meaning that government policies, especially during election years, are often to blame. Chapter 6, Short-Term Election Gains, Long-Term Economic Pain. It's tempting to look at short-term economic gains during an election year. Politicians often promise immediate relief, such as tax cuts, direct payments, or stimulus checks. While these measures can provide a temporary economic boost, they often lead to long-term problems. A great example of this is the US tax cuts of 2017. President Trump's administration slashed corporate taxes to boost growth. In the short term, the stock market surged, and many companies saw higher profits. But in the long run, the US government faced a massive increase in the deficit, and debt levels skyrocketed. The problem with these short-term gains is that they often fail to solve the underlying economic issues. Instead of focusing on sustainable growth, politicians are focused on delivering quick fixes to win votes. This strategy can backfire. For example, after the 2008 global financial crisis, many countries introduced stimulus packages that boosted economies temporarily. But when the money ran out, they faced high national debts and slower economic recovery. The real danger comes when these policies create a reliance on government support. In 2009, the UK introduced a stimulus plan that gave citizens cash payments. While the economy grew for a short time, the government's debt increased, leading to austerity measures in the following years. These cuts caused more economic pain in the long run, as unemployment rose and public services were reduced. Politicians often try to solve short-term problems with band-aid fixes. Thomas Piketty, in his book Capital in the 21st Century, argues that short-term tax cuts or welfare increases create illusory growth. While these measures might seem helpful, they don't address the deeper issues in the economy, like income inequality or stagnant wages. They only push the real challenges down the road. In the end, these short-term economic boosts are unsustainable. Countries that focus on quick fixes without addressing structural problems end up paying for it in the future. Whether it's inflation, debt, or unemployment, the long-term consequences of election-driven policies can outweigh the temporary benefits. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Elections shape the future in ways we often don't see coming. Thanks for watching.